think I catered to my strengths. I was like, oh, I'm going to apply to the best schools, the top schools. I didn't think about as thoroughly as I wish I had that first time, and definitely catered towards round 2 and 3.
I think your advice will be really helpful, especially talking about in between application cycles and what you did.
Yes.
If you want to do a little intro and tell us a little bit about you and your background, and then we'll kind of go from there.
My name is Rachel Lawman. I am currently 28. I was a radiologic technologist for about 4 years before I finally got into PA school. I got married, I had a little dog, and it's just us, my tiny little fam bam. We moved across the country to Tennessee for school, which is not where we had thought we would end up, to be honest. We wanted to stay in Minnesota, where we're from. So my background is mostly, like I said, imaging, radiologic technology, general X-ray mostly. I did a lot of work specifically in orthopedics and urgent care, as well as orthopedic outpatient surgery. I was able to work so closely with PAs in surgery and PAs in the clinic. And I always knew I wanted to be a PA, but I thought imaging was a really great backup to have and a really good skill to also have for the profession because I know like how intertwined all of the areas within healthcare are. It just took a little bit longer to get here than I had planned. However, having that background and having that time to hone in on skills and build relationships and rapport with not only professionals but patients, you build that confidence about yourself, and going through all of those unknowns, having a 4-year gap really helped me. I'm not worried about OSCEs. I don't have any concerns with interactions with patients or fear of the unknown. There's always going to be some, but being able to adapt because I've already been exposed to that. And I think that was huge. And I feel like that's what healthcare is. It's all about adaptability. And PA school, really, you have to be adaptable 100%.
That's a great perspective because you're right. And sometimes, I don't know if you'd call it imposter syndrome, but
Yes.
there is that fear aspect going into those first patient encounters. I think that's part of the reason that PA school requires so much patient care experience is they want to make sure that you are good with that and you know what you're getting yourself into. I didn't have a ton of patient care experience and some schools don't require it as much, but honestly, having the uncomfortable encounters and the tough experiences are what prepare you, and having that extra time in healthcare was probably hugely beneficial and definitely x-ray stuff. People show me an x-ray and I'm like, I don't know. Like that's a bone. Clearly I haven't done that in a long time, but that's a huge skill for you and your classmates to have. What does it take to become, and make sure I say this right, a radiologic technologist? Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. What was that path to get there? Is that an associate's? Is that a bachelor's or a post-grad program?
So it truly depends on where you are as an individual. I don't know if there's a difference between the associate being a technician or a technologist. I have a bachelor's and I was through a university. And so I got my BS in radiological technology or radiological sciences. However, I had to do the 2 years like you would do for an associate, but I did it at an affiliated hospital. So I had to go through the whole interview process, just like getting into PA school, an interview to get into a program just to complete my degree and my training. First year, honestly, it feels like I'm in extra school again, but harder because the first year was a lot of learning, imaging background, history, physics. And then the second year, you're on clinicals, you go to different locations, you go to different modalities, you get to experience all sorts. I was fortunate enough because mine was within the Minneapolis VA hospital, and my classroom was in our imaging department. So we were hands on exposed to imaging real life day one and able to build those relationships with patients quickly. Most of our rotations were in the hospital, but we had three outside of the hospital. So like ER and then two different pediatric facilities. It was a very diverse experience. It was a lot of working really hard and not getting paid. I'm paying for it. So I feel like I'm there again.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds very similar to that experience. Did that program set you up well for PA school as far as classes, or did you have to take more prereqs, or did a lot of your classes, quote unquote, count for when you went to apply?
You had to have all of your generals and prerequisites to get an interview to qualify for the affiliated hospitals. But then all of the work I did within that hospital was called field experience. So it was just like pass fail. So even though I took classes at the VA to
Interesting.
get my degree, the university considered all of that to be pass fail. I couldn't
Right.
utilize that experience for my PA application because I graduated, applied for PA all within the same year.
Okay.
Didn't get in that first year, but I had phlebotomy prior to imaging. And so I think that's a huge skill to also have. I know everybody goes CNA or options like that, but I think phlebotomy was a huge skill also and learning more about the lab and things that I am refreshing now.
Yeah, it comes back to you. I think that is great experience for so many reasons, like just the X-ray experience, but then just going through that program too and having more of knowing what to expect. So you completed your program, you knew you wanted to do PA, so you are already applying to PA school. Tell us a little bit about that first application cycle. What was your plan going as far as choosing schools?
So that first application, it wasn't how I probably should have done it. I should have taken more time. The whole time that the cycle was open, I was finishing up school. I was planning my wedding. I was studying for the GRE, studying for my X-ray boards. And so a lot of the little details that go into applying to PA school were as focused. And that's 100% on me for not organizing it or utilizing resources that I could have easily done a Google search on. I think that that hurt me a lot going forward after that application. I learned more and more. And I think that's something that's really important. If it doesn't go well the first time, learn why. I learned from mistakes of, oh, I forgot to submit that one thing. They're not going to tell you you forgot something, not all of them. If they do, you're lucky. I had a whole spreadsheet and I thought I was so organized, but also I don't think I catered to my strengths. I was like, oh, I'm going to apply to the best schools, the top schools. There's so many applicants for so many schools. And
Mhm.
you think about the percentage that get interviews and the percentage that gets accepted. How do you stand out? And those are things that I didn't think about as thoroughly as I wish I had that first time and definitely catered towards round 2 and 3 for me. It was just like everything happening at once, and I do not recommend it if you can avoid it or have
Yeah.
a system that is maybe a little bit less stressful all at the same time.
It's a lot, and everything is very nitpicky, which you know, but you don't really know until you get into it. I know, like, the person in our office has had issues with that because, just to explain what I mean by that, she took biochemistry at a school that was on a quarter system. So she took the first 2 sections, but they offered a 3rd section, but she didn't take that. So technically she had enough hours to fulfill the prerequisite that she was looking for. But there was like this tiny asterisk at the bottom of the prereq page that basically said if you went to a school that was on quarter system and they offered another section in the sequence, that you had to take that also. And I mean, we were just like, what? This is so complicated.
Something like that happened to me actually on my 3rd round. I retook courses. I applied once, applied twice, took a year off to
Okay.
retake some classes, rebuild my GPA a little bit, try to show that I'm doing the work that they recommended or things that maybe I got a C in and try to do a better GPA. Even though CASPA brings it together, you get both, which is a huge downfall in my opinion. But at least I had the chance to try to get an A. So I retook anatomy one summer. And one thing that hurt me on this last application was when I started college as a freshman, anatomy and phys was lumped with the lab. They weren't separate courses,
Yeah.
but you got separate grades. It was really confusing. And so when I retook anatomy, I didn't retake the lab. And so on my last application, my lab expired by one semester. even though my anatomy grade continued because I retook it, it's the 1 credit lab
Mhm.
that disqualified my application.
In that school. Yeah.
It's little things and it's frustrating. No matter how you do it, it's frustrating,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and that's what I mean, I feel like that happens every time. I have a question about between cycles or after your cycles. First question is, did you reach out to any of the schools directly, feedback for advice, and did they give you any?
absolutely, and that's one thing that I would highly recommend. Rejection is hard, but how you grow from it and how you learn from it, it's only gonna benefit you. Not every school is gonna be personable. It depends on how many people they have emailing them, how many applications they've had to process through. I found that some schools were very approachable and they're like, "Hey, you qualified XYZ, but you could do improvements here." And then others were like referred to our prerequisite page,
Yeah.
which it is what it is. I understand it. Needle in the haystack, right? Of applications. But the ones that I did get that personalized feedback, I took to heart. I greatly appreciated it. And I worked on those. And those are the schools that I reapplied to show that I am interested. And also reaching out, it shows that you care and it shows that you are interested in that program, which I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that they keep your emails, like, within your file at
Some
some
do for
schools.
sure. Yeah, some definitely do.
So the more they see or hear your name, that might help you
Yeah.
stand out.
That was my next question is between cycles, did you apply to the same schools or did you pick new schools in between application cycles?
So there was some overlap between the 3 different cycles. On my last one, there was only, like, 2 schools between the 1st and 2nd that I reapplied to, and it's because I was very intentional on how I was applying. I had learned from my experiences, I learned from my errors, and I learned how they weigh your application in some aspect. Every school weighs applications differently, and that can be really frustrating because some take a very holistic approach and some you're weighted based on certain criteria. So this 3rd cycle, again, very specific, very intentional, played to my strengths, which is for me, my patient care experience, my thousands of hours working with people. But my low was my GPA. I was kind of at that cutoff. I was not your 4.0 student. I am also out of school for 4 years, so I'm not your typical applicant. And that was really hard. Like, how do you set yourself apart when GPA can be so heavily weighted? So just being really intentional, I think, is what helped me in this last round and understanding the process a little bit more
Mhm.
and getting help from the P8 platform. There's so many more things that I didn't know was there before this like 3rd time, and I don't
Yeah.
understand why.
Yeah. There's more and more popping up, which is great because it's still a very complicated process. When I applied, there was the PA forum and one book, and then I think nothing else. Like social media, like wasn't a thing yet. So there was no help whatsoever. But now, I mean, there's definitely a lot more and more specifics with different programs and things
Oh, yes.
like helpful.
And all of the changes that are happening with like the PA cat. I think
Mhm.
that's right, PA cat.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a huge change if more schools go towards it, and
Yeah.
it's an ever-growing profession, and therefore it's ever-growing competition.
Yep.
So,
It's more,
uh,
I wish they would get like on the same page, but
it cracks me up because a lot of the PAs I worked with, they would be like, "I don't understand why you're not getting in," or
yeah.
things like that, and they're like, "If I had to go through this, I wouldn't get in right now." It
And not so many times. Like if I had the same application that I applied with, I would not get accepted my first round, especially at the schools I applied to. There's more options now, and I think I would have had more schools to apply
Mhm.
to. But yeah, I don't think at that point I would have gotten in. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, I see the pros and cons because it's a good thing. Like, I think they keep the standards very high for our profession,
Yes.
and that's a good thing. But then it stings when you see people that you know are extremely qualified and would be amazing PAs not getting in. And I understand the process. I understand the reasons. I understand why requirements are set up the way they are. but it's still frustrating. Like, there are times I want to just send an email and be like, please let this person in. They are fantastic and they will be a great PA and I would have loved to have them in my class. And that just doesn't work. So it's tough. It's tough for sure. But like you said, there's more resources now. Hopefully, things that are helping to make the application process easier. At what point did you decide or know you wanted to do PA?
My freshman year of college, I was nursing initially. Kind of a weird journey. So I took CIS, it's called College and Schools, when I was in high school. So I got college credit, but I was within my high school not going to a facility. And I got like A's and B's in some of my sciences and calc. And my high school teacher said that B's aren't good enough for a nursing degree, which is really disheartening, especially when you're just going into college. And I was a nursing major. And then my guidance counselor also said that I'm not a competitive applicant for nursing at that school. And I was like, okay, this is really discouraging.
I feel like you need to
um,
write them letters like now.
right? Look at me now.
Right.
So I kind of took all that frustration. I was like, okay, what do you want to do? You're 19 years old. Where do you see yourself? And a lot of heart to heart conversations. And I knew I wanted to work with patients. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. Both my parents work within the imaging field. And so imaging was really easy for me because I already understood it to some extent. But I knew I wanted to do more than just have that short interaction with patients. I knew I wanted to have a more in depth rapport with them. I wanted to follow them through their journey, researching all these things. And I kind of stumbled upon PA. I kind of wavered between MD and PA. And what really set the two apart for me individually was the lateral mobility, the ability to go from derm to orthopedics potentially. Not saying that that would be an easy lateral movement, but just having that ability to adjust based on your interest, your needs, family life, etc. I like variety, and so maybe that's why I was drawn to it, is I don't like to get bored. Honestly, now I don't think that whatever specialty I choose, I'll ever get bored. But that's what really drew me to that profession. I saw so many of my classmates have science majors, biology, chemistry, you name it, and then they didn't have a job because they were waiting in limbo to get into a PA program. I'm like, what am I going to do with this degree? What am I going to be happy with if I don't get in right away? And so that's how I landed on imaging, is because I got to work with patients. I got to be hands on, and it was something I'm really interested in. And that pushed me further and further into the drive for this profession. I'm glad it worked out. Not that I would have gotten bored with imaging. I just knew that I needed to do more and needed more time with patients. That quick interaction isn't enough for me.
That is so smart to set yourself up like that. Did you work through your application cycles and everything? That, yeah. You're completely right because that is the hard thing. A lot of these positions are very much entry level, or you may not need a certification, or you may, but they're ones that like take a long time. But you also are like learning skills that I do now. So, like, the things that I did as a CNA are not things that I do now. I appreciate that role a lot more
Oh,
because I
absolutely.
was in it. And thinking back to my class, I don't think we had anyone from X-ray in my class.
I'm the only one in mine.
Yeah, like, I don't think we had anybody. We had a couple paramedics, which they were fantastic whenever we're talking about ER trauma stuff and, like, learning phlebotomy. They basically taught us how to do that. And then we had a dietitian. She was super helpful. One of my best friends had worked in a dermatology office for a few years, and so that was helpful. So it was like all these different backgrounds, and I'm like, I was a CNA at a rehab hospital for a summer. I have nothing to add to this. When it comes to clinical stuff, I know my strengths. I can make a study guide that's very helpful and organize things, but like clinically, having those people with different backgrounds was very helpful for us as fellow students, but honestly would be helpful now. That's what I try to tell people now is look into what's offered at your school. And if there is something that could set you
Mhm.
up to actually have a substantial role in medicine, do that. not every school's gonna offer that, but some do, and it's a
One
big
thing
there.
one thing really cool is I worked with a lot of CNAs in the outpatient orthopedic surgery center. And when I got my CNA, because I did that, but I never used it, I was like, oh, you can do that. Like you can work on the surgical floor and work in outpatient surgery and like, learn from nurses, from PAs, from the MDs, and they'll let you shadow in those surgeries. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is that CNA isn't just in a nursing home. It's not just in a hospital. There are so many avenues that you can work in. And sometimes that can help step you up. Maybe that gets you into an MA position or more responsibility, more outlets, more people to work with so that you can have more rapport with physicians and PAs.
I think your background is interesting because I went straight from undergrad. How has PA school is it what you expected? Is it different since you kinda had some experience in a medical program? What's that been like?
It's not the same. It's really hard taking a 4-year gap and then going back to school. And I have a fellow classmate, a few that are actually similar to me, where it's been a little while since we've been in the traditional academic standing. How you studied in undergrad is not how you will study in PA school. It's different. You have to change, you have to adapt, you have to figure out what's working, what's not very quickly. They say that they eased us in our first semester. Don't really know what that means, but now I kind of do. It just wasn't as like it wasn't clin med that first semester, but it was really hard to get back into learning how to study and not burn out super quickly, which I definitely did. It's not the same. Like how I did it in undergrad, how I did it in imaging. It was just so much harder because it's a lot
Yeah.
more specifics. It's a lot more data. Whereas in undergrad and imaging, you could kind of just like study to pass a test, right? You're no longer studying to pass a test. Yes, you have to pass it, but you're not studying to pass it. You're studying it to become a great provider. You're studying it for the safety and well being of your patient. And I think that just puts a lot more emphasis on the long hours, the long days. It's all worth it. It's all pertinent. Granted, you're not going to get tested on every single detail, but it's all necessary information to have as a future provider. And that was a huge difference going from undergrad to PA school is it's a lot more info and it's a lot of important info.
Yeah, there's a different weight on it at that point. You nailed it. You have to kind of be able to adjust, be flexible, figure out what you need to do. But also, personally, I think if you can get into PA school, you can do that. It may not be easy, but you can figure those things out and make it work.
I've heard
Uh,
many say the hardest part is getting in. So once
yeah.
you've gotten in, you're there. They want you to succeed. They don't want you to fail out,
Yeah.
but you are an advocate for yourself. If you're struggling, you have to do something about it. We're all adults. You have to take advantage of your time, your professor's time, and advocate for yourself in your educational journey to becoming a PA. And I think that's something that's so important is because in undergrad, you're just kind of a number in some universities. Here, you're a very important number because they want you to succeed. They chose you
Yeah.
specifically. And
Agreed.
so take advantage of it. And that's one thing, even though my class is like 100, I don't feel like I'm one in 100. I feel like I have personal one on one time with multiple professors. They all care. Some will stay after hours, come on weekends. I feel like our professors actually care, which is super huge.
Yeah. You have a good support system there. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll do fantastic in the rest of your program, and then you'll have to back and update us on where you end up and how things finished out for you.
Absolutely.